Leslie Swedish with Moxxi Coffee Company and the Moxxi Women's Foundation, and today I'm speaking with Lyndi Cochran. She is a dancer, and she says that she's a small person with a big personality. Thanks for joining us today, Lyndi. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Leslie. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Oh, absolutely. So, can you tell me a little bit about your dancing? What is it you do?
Yeah, of course. So I'm a pole dancer. I have been pole dancing for a little over 9 years now. And it's something that I fell in love with at kind of an early age. I started when I was about 16. And just from my first class, I was like, I know this is something that I want to pursue.
Nice. And, you've been participating, because it's a sport now.
Yes, it's such a, much like just traditional dance, there are like sport elements to it, but there's also a lot of artistic elements to it. So it's such a range, and there are so many different styles of pole dancing that I think a lot of people don't realize. I remember, oh gosh, maybe 5 years ago, I was talking to one of my friends, and a really beautiful song came on like the radio. And I was like, oh, I love this song. It was kind of slow, more like lyrical, contemporary. And I was like, oh, I would love to pole to this. And they were like so confused. They were like, how would you pole dance to this? Like, this is like a slow song. Like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, how are you going to make the Righteous Brothers sexy? And I'm like, it doesn't have to be sexy. Like, it's dance. It's just another type of dance.
Well, and it's extremely athletic. I know I used to own one, but it was like one of those ones on tension that you'd set up and take down. The upper body strength that it takes is just absolutely incredible.
Yeah, it's pretty insane how, so I, a few years ago, I had the opportunity to judge at the POSA World Championships in Florida. Mm-hmm. And watching these like top tier world pole athletes take the stage and just seeing like the sheer size of their muscles and their definition and just like the execution of very advanced dynamic moves, my jaw was on the floor like the whole time. It was pretty amazing.
I bet. I think it's fascinating. What are some of the things that you're judging in a competition like that?
So it kind of depends on the category. Specifically like for sports, for sport categories, you would primarily look for obviously like technique and execution. Really, at least for the federation that I am a certified judge for a sport routine, the most ideal thing to keep in mind is that you only want to incorporate moves that you can execute perfectly. That's how you accumulate the most points. So if it's a move that's a little bit of a stretch for someone and they're like, oh, sometimes I can do it, sometimes I can't, and I only have a month to put this routine together, it's typically something that you would like want to avoid. So obviously like basic requirements for each move, technique, also artistry, flow, how seamless is it? And of course like performance, like what is your face doing? You don't want like a dead stare while someone's like on stage doing a routine. So it's a lot of things to keep in mind. I teach out of my home here in Austin, and with a lot of my students, especially for the ones that are, if they're getting frustrated or if, they're being extremely challenged by something that I'm teaching them, I like to remind them that pole, at least for me, is like a series, like a series of checklists. So for each move, I'm like, okay, I need to squeeze my knees, I need to put the ball in my armpit, really engage my core, get my hips above my head, then I hook my outside leg, and then I shift into an outside leg hang, and then I rotate like into an inside leg hang, and I have to make sure I hit the meaty side of my torso and really squeeze in my inner thigh, and also make sure I'm in the right knee pit like position. So it's just a lot of like one thing after another to just kind of keep in mind whenever you're doing either a move or a combination of moves.
What is the demographic, would you say, of women that you teach?
Oh, goodness. I would say mostly like women 20 to 40 years old. But I mean, really, what's so amazing about pole is, and I mean, this is probably true for most like sports and arts, but at any age, you can dive in and give it a go. Whenever I first started poling, like I mentioned, I was 16, but the only reason I went is because my mom was the person who really wanted to try it, and she didn't want to go by herself. I had been on a competitive dance team for 8 years, and I left my dance team. I had been off my dance team for about 3 months, and I really just, wasn't thriving. I wasn't super happy. Of course, I was really enjoying like all the additional freedom and like time I had, but I wasn't like pursuing anything that I loved. And she, saw that as an opportunity for her to be able to try something that she wanted to do, and then also, a bonding moment for us. We could spend time together, and she, had a feeling that I would love it, and she was right. So, and I believe she was like in her 40s, I think. So, really, you can do it at any age. There are actual categories for like women 40 and over and things like that too, so that whenever, like, should a polar decide to compete, they are able to compete in the category that's like best for them. You wouldn't want someone who's like in their 60s having to compete against someone who's like in their 20s, if that isn't super fair. So it's nice that a lot of competitions are structured in that way so that everyone can be like in their designated categories that fit them appropriately based on like age or like range of motion or like ability level.
So if you've been doing this for 9 years, what are some of the biggest changes you've seen in that time frame?
Oh, goodness. Well, when I first started poling, it wasn't nearly as well known in terms of like being a sport or an art as it is now. So I've definitely seen a lot of shift in like the perception of it just as like a whole in society. Of course, sometimes I'll get like comments on my TikTok videos, and it's like people who don't understand the difference between like pole dancing and like stripping, or they don't understand that it's a sport. And it's like super weird to me to see, because I'm like, ew, it's like 2022. Like, you still think like that? That's so odd. But that is one of the things I've noticed is, even though of course there are still some outliers, it's gradually becoming like more and more, I guess, mainstream would be the term. And I really have just seen a lot of growth in just the pole industry, like in general. Like, there are so many more like brands that make pole wear, like articles of clothing specifically designed for poling. They're basically like athletic swimsuits. So they'll like hold up. That's one thing about pole. You need a lot of skin contact, which is why like my grandmother is always like, I love seeing your videos, but you're in such like tiny bottoms. And I'm like, well, I need my inner thighs. So like, there's not really a lot I can do about that.
Do you bruise? I know I bruise like crazy.
Oh, girl, yeah, you bruise. There's really no way around it. I actually have just put on some arnica today. It's they make I believe like capsules or pill form, but there's also like a cream and a gel, and it's to help heal bruising faster. And yeah, you definitely bruise, especially whenever polars start exploring how to climb. Obviously, there's like a proper technique, proper positioning on how you should climb and where your weight should be like shifted and positioned, and what areas of your legs and your
so it
arms
gets better.
are. Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
It gets better. It's usually like whenever you learn new stuff, you're gonna bruise. If you've never done it before, you're most likely gonna bruise. But it definitely gets better over time, just with practice and years of experience.
That's awesome. So is this something that you do full time? Is it, just a passion project?
Totally, yeah. So it's something I do part time. I would love to do it full time. I just haven't really had the opportunity to explore that yet. But it also is kind of a passion project of mine, just because I love it so much, and it's such a huge part of who I am and who I've become as a person. So I just never want to lose that side of me. I started teaching in the Houston area shortly after I took my first class. And I taught there for about 3 years. And then I taught at a local Austin studio called Brass Ovaries, which is, I would consider like my home studio. It's such a wonderful place. And now I just am currently kind of teaching out of my home, doing privates and one-on-ones and things like that.
Very nice. What's your favorite part about the sport?
Oh, goodness. What is it? You know, I wish I could tell you. I would probably have to say, I really just love how different it can be. I follow so many polars on TikTok and Instagram, and just seeing so many different styles. And there's so many polars, like Yvonne Smake, for example. She does a lot of like contemporary pole where it's just very like, I don't even know how to describe it. It's just so different than anything I've ever seen, and it's so beautiful. And then I follow people like Spinning Shay, who is equally as amazing, but she does a lot of like club tricks and like drop splits and a lot of like bendy shit, like putting her legs behind her head and stuff that I'm like, dang, how can I do that? So it's really amazing to see a sport that can be so different. I just don't think we get a lot of like opportunities for that and a lot of different like physical activities.
What do you think what would you say to somebody who, was thinking about trying to get into polling, but was shy for either, reasons of maybe not being quite so in shape just yet, or the stigma that surrounds polling?
Totally. So if it was someone who was hesitant because, they feel like they're not in shape enough to do it, pole on top of being an art and a sport, like it's exercise. So it'll get you to the level of like physique that you want. And the best way to do it is to just do it. Just go and try it. Of course there are lots of like home conditioning things, or like, I encounter a lot of people that were like, oh, well, I have to go to the gym for a few months before I start because I want to be able to hold up my body. And while I totally understand that, just by trying to hold up your body, you're going to build those muscles. So I would advise anyone who's hesitant for that reason to just not let that hold them back. Life is too short to put off the things you want to try. The thing about pole that I find so unique is the community surrounding pole is so warm and loving and like supportive. I don't think I've ever met a pole dancer that I didn't like or that I didn't immediately fall in love with, because they were just so kind and fun. And that's one thing that I really love about going to studios, is that there's such supportive like environments, and people trying things for the first time. Once they nail it, everyone's cheering them on or trying to help out and just encouraging each other. So, if someone was feeling a little bit more shy, or they were like, oh, I just don't know, that's very much out of my comfort zone, I don't know if I should try that. I would just keep, the community in mind, because they will be there to support you and to love you and just encourage you, because at the end of the day, it's not about, comparing yourself to anyone else that's in the class. It's just about being better than you were the day before. And really, if someone is hesitant because of the stigma, I just don't really know what I would tell them. Mainly just because it's like, who cares? Like, doesn't matter. Like, if you want to do it, then you should do it. Being concerned about the stigma isn't going to take away the stigma. It's not going to make it go away. So you might as well just do whatever you want while you have the time.
That's great. I had a question and I lost it.
I hate it when that happens.
I know, my brain. It's late. It's late here anyway for me. It's the end of my day. So if, I recently went on a search to try to find some classes, and as it turns out, there is no place near me. So, if somebody were to try to get into doing something at home, even for exercise or just for fun, what are some resources for them, to jump into it, for not only, learning content, but also equipment? Do you know? Do you have?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are a few different pole brands that create or produce poles that I would recommend. The first one is X Pole. They have been around for so long. Jennifer Lopez in the Super Bowl that one year. That was an X pole. They do a lot of like, they're involved in a lot of like media that revolves around pole. So I trust them completely. That's the pole that I have in the background is one of their dual line poles. That's studio grade, so it's incredibly heavy and sturdy, and it's permanently mounted to my ceiling. And then there's Loop It Pole that also is a very like well-known, trustworthy brand that I would recommend for anyone wanting to, look into getting one for their home. Depending on, the ceiling height and the type of ceiling that a person has, and whether they own a home, whether they're renting, all of those factors play into which pole you should purchase. They have, like I mentioned, they have permanently mounted ones. They also make pressure mounted ones like you explored. Where
there's some issues with those.
They can be a little tricky. The key is to check it regularly as you use it. It's likely that things can get loosened, and also with changes in the weather, changes in the climate, that can also affect. And maybe your house is a little bit older like mine is, and it'll shift sometimes. Like all of those things will affect your pole. So it's good to always, double check your equipment if you have noticed like a drastic change outside, or if you even just hear a creak that you're like, I don't know about that. But they also have stage poles, which is what I pulled on for years before I finally got my home pole. And those come with a round weighted base that the pole is attached to, and then it's not attached to the ceiling. So those are great if you want to set it up outside. Maybe you want to set it up in your garage, but you don't want it to live there forever. They're also really good for any kind of like video or photo shoots that you need to transport a pole to. So there are a lot of different options for people who would want to look into getting a pole for their home. And as far as wanting to learn but not having any studios nearby, there are a lot of online platforms where people can take pole lessons from like very beginner, never even touched a pole before, to like hyper advanced, doing level 4 or 5 moves. Some of those are, I believe there's a Pole Dance Academy. I think it might be London Pole Dance Academy. I'm not quite sure. I believe X-Pole has X-Pole TV. I know there's Cleo the Hurricane has a platform where people can subscribe to attend classes, and also if there is a specific pole dancer that someone looks up to who's, they might also just have their own personal system. I know a friend of mine, Jen Arrow, she's an amazing poler, and her style is so different from mine. And I took a workshop from her recently, and it was so fun to try something else. And she just launched a bunch of virtual classes. Natasha Wang, who's a very well-known poler, also has, I believe it's called Poletica, where she offers like lessons virtually. And a lot of times you're able to access the recordings of those lessons as well, so you can revisit what you've learned at a later time if your body's like, okay, I'm done, maybe we try this later. So there are a lot of resources, a lot more resources than when I started in 2013. Obviously, it's been a long time since then, which is really nice.
I have a PSA of my own. So I had one of the ones that goes on tension, and I had 2 really bad things happen. One was the top of it wasn't on one of the rafters of the ceiling, and it punched a hole in the ceiling. Yeah. That was great. That was my friend's mother's living room. We would put our kids down for our naps, and we'd get our little pole out, and we'd do our little exercises until we put a hole in the ceiling. That was a good time.
Oh no!
Always check the tension on your pole, because if you are spinning and you fly off of it, it hurts a lot.
Always check the tension on your pole. Always make sure you have your pole lined up with like a stud or a beam in your ceiling. If you are concerned about the pressure of the pole putting a hole in your ceiling, one thing that I've heard is people will take like a wooden board and put it above the top mount so that the weight is being distributed, which can help with, ceiling cracks or holes or anything like that. And also just avoid the Amazon pulls. Like, do not buy like a $200 pull from Spencer's or anything like that. Always find a brand. No, it truly isn't. It truly isn't the injuries that could happen and probably will happen, especially if you're really wanting to progress quickly and move on to more like dynamic movements where you're throwing your weight around or you're doing crazy flips and things like that. Definitely go with a brand that you've researched and trust.
I have a couple more questions. How would you describe your style?
Oh goodness, my style. So whenever I'm just improvising or just dancing for funsies with no direction, I really love like a slow, sultry, contemporary. I love pole dancing in socks, and I love trying to make my movements just like flow seamlessly from one to the next. So I think a slow, sultry contemporary is how I would describe my go-to style. But I really enjoy exploring all styles. I love practicing like really advanced tricks and tumbles and things like that, as well as I think it's called hard style, which is with like giant heels and knee pads, and you're just like throwing yourself around.
What's your favorite trick?
Oh goodness, my favorite trick is the satellite. I don't really know how I would describe it to you.
Can you show us?
I don't have my pole gear on
not
right
dressed
now.
for
I wish
it?
I did.
Yeah.
I wish I did, but I can send you some videos of me. There's amazing. A bunch of them on my Instagram, obviously, because it's like my favorite move. There's a bunch of them on my Instagram.
Would I recognize it if I went searching?
You might. I usually mention it in the captions because I love it so much.
We'll go search for it.
It's basically you're upside down and you're holding yourself with your elbow behind your back and the side of your neck, and you are using your other arm to hold one of your legs, and you're like upside down in like a split. Like I said, it's kind of hard to explain. I'm sure your visual is like all over the place.
That's all right. I'll just go searching later. I often find myself on Pole Talk, so.
My whole feed is like Pole Talk, and I live for it. It's so good.
Okay, so if anybody's in the Austin area and they wanted to reach out to you for lessons, how would they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so they can always DM me on Instagram, but I also have a website, which is bendylyndi.com, and through there they can learn more about my rates, and there's a contact form, so they can tell me a little about, where they are in their pole journey, what they'd like to work on, and just so I can kind of see how I can help them. Maybe it's something I'm not very specialized in, or something that I don't think I'm the best fit for. I can always recommend them to one of the studios in the area, which there are a ton of pole studios in Austin, if you can believe it.
I'm in the wrong place.
Really where are you based?
So I am in Stillwater, New York, where it's in between Albany and Saratoga, so upstate.
Oh, okay. And there's no pole studios there? Dang, there's a really big studio.
There probably is in Albany, but it's a good 40-45 minutes away, and I just...
Oh.
Yeah, I can't...
That's a drive.
Yeah, it's too much. I don't have time for that.
I lived in Wimberley, which is like Texas Hill Country, through college and a little after college, and the studio that I was going to is North Austin, so I was driving about 40-45 minutes every Sunday to come to what we call pole church, which is just your pole classes on Sundays. And so I totally understand like the drive. And it was nice that all the classes I wanted to take were all in a row on Sunday, so I only had to make the drive once.
There you go. Sounds like my kind of church. I'd show up for that. And so you're Bendy Lyndi on Instagram. That's also your website. Is that also your TikTok handle?
It is, yeah. It's also my TikTok handle.
All right, fantastic. We'll make sure to have all that up on the blog as well. So if anybody wants to give you a follow, check things out, they can. If you've ever been inspired to grab a pole, I highly suggest it. It's a lot of fun and a really, really great workout. Just, like I said, watch out for those tension ones. They could be
yeah,
trouble.
And if you have a studio nearby, definitely go to the studio.
Yeah.
It's really important, especially for like people who have never done it before, to build the proper like foundations and the proper technique. If you are like self-taught or you're just going off of videos and you're not paying very much attention to your technique, there's a higher likely, like you're more likely to train bad habits that will hurt you in the future as you try to progress and learn more things.
It's like anything else. If you're not doing a proper squat, you're going to blow out your knees. So
exactly, exactly. Truly, yes. Except sometimes you're like holding yourself up by like one arm and a shoulder. So really focus on your technique.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. I can't wait to scroll through your Instagram and find out what that satellite trick is. And I look forward to more videos and content in the future.
Thank you so much, Leslie. I really appreciate you taking the time today. And I hope you enjoy the satellite.
I think I will. I'm super excited. Have a great night. Thank you so much.